Let's take a break. Coffee break tayo. Wala tayong cafecito.
Welcome to another coffee break where we're able to learn, discuss, and discover various topics. So I'm glad you're able to join me on your coffee break. So grab yourself a hot cup of coffee, have a seat, and we'll get started. Today's topic, we'll be looking at analyzing community problems and understanding that in the work that you're engaged in your community, communities have problems just like people. Problems are just something that's part of life, and they go together with being alive, and every community has problems. So it's just one of those facts of community life, and it's important to understand that communities, like people, try to solve their problems, and analyzing those problems helps in finding solutions for them. And a very basic example of a community problem is that perhaps your downtown area of the community is declining. Stores are closing and moving out, and no new stores are moving in. So we want to revitalize that downtown area. And the question is, how do we do it? And the thinking here is actually fairly simple. You're better off analyzing why that decline is taking place, why the problem is occurring, rather than simply jumping in and trying to fix it, right? Throwing those quick band-aids at it, throwing some money at it to try to fix the issue that really won't fix the long-term problem. A good analysis will lead to better long-term solutions, and therefore a good analysis is worth taking time to do it to ensure that you have the best possible outcomes for the community as a whole. So I'll be explaining what analyzing community problems is about and why it can be helpful, and then how to do it. And of course, we won't go into a full-on lesson and lecture, but just an overview of the issues so that you can be better prepared to understand what it is and what it isn't. So overarching question, what is a community problem? And this covers a lot of ground. There's a lot of list of things, and you probably know some of the main things, and you can name the leading problems in your own community, and chances are that you can at least start the list there, right? So it could be examples of community problems could be adolescent pregnancy, adolescent substance use, access to clean drinking water, child abuse, neglect, crime, domestic violence, environmental contamination, environmental issues, ethnic conflicts, health disparities, HIV, AIDS, inadequate or unable to access emergency services, inequality, jobs, lack of affordable housing is a huge one, poverty, racism, transportation, violence, and the list goes on and on and on, right? And of course, you can definitely add to that. So rather than aiming for a complete problem list, here are some criteria that you may consider when identifying your own community problems, right? And it's understanding whether or not the problem occurs too frequently, right? So it's frequency. You might also want to look at, has this problem lasted for a while, right? Its duration. Does this problem affect many people, right? So what is the scope or the range of people impacted or affected by this? Is the problem disrupting or disruptive to personal or community life, and and its intensity, right? What is the severity of the problem itself? The problem deprives people of legal or moral rights, right? So what are the equity issues with this particular problem, and is the issue truly perceived as a problem, right? So that's the public perception, because what you might think is an issue might not be something that others identify with being as an issue, right? And the last thing I think is criteria or criterion, and that's more of a perception because it's a very important one, and they can also help indicate the community's readiness, or the individual's readiness, or the group's readiness for addressing the issue within that particular or your community. So just keep in mind that sometimes what is seen as a problem can vary from place to place and from group to group in the same place, right? So perceptions might change, and what might be an issue to you might not seem like an issue to others. And of course, a lot of times age has to do with the issue, and then of course involvement in the community changes the perception of how things seem from the inside that seem differently on the outside. Okay, so. Let's look at what analyzing community problems is really all about, right? And analyzing community problems is just a way of thinking carefully about a problem or an issue before you act on it, right? Or before, and I'm alluding to the solution. So it first involves identifying reasons that for a problem and why it exists, and only then identifying possible solutions and a plan for action or a plan for improvement. And the techniques for analyzing community problems require simple logic and sometimes the collection of data, of evidence, whether it's factual data, anecdotal data, or stats and info and reports and so forth. People always ask, well, why should I analyze a community problem? And that's just, it's really, the importance lies in you would better identify what the problem or the issue is. It's also to understand what is at the heart of the problem, what is driving that issue in your community, what is driving that problem. And it allows you to determine the barriers and resources associated with addressing the problem itself. And it also helps to develop your best possible action steps for addressing that particular problem. Having a plan of action is always better than taking a few random shots at trying to solve the problem, right? Throwing some band-aids out at the problem and hoping that one sticks, and that really never works. So the next question would be, when should I analyze a community problem? And every community problem should benefit from any type of analysis, and the only possible exception is when the problem is an immediate crisis that requires action at this very moment, and even then analysis should help later, right? So we have many examples in the world that we're living in today, with this, especially with the pandemic, right? So we are analyzing as we are collecting the data, but there are things that we need to do in the now to ensure that we are solving our community's issues, right? So, however, there are conditions when an analysis is especially important, and I'll name those. And they're especially important when the community problem is not defined very clearly. So there's a problem, you just really can't pin it down. And very little known is about the community problem or its possible consequences, and whether those consequences are in the now or in the long term. It's also important when to analyze when you want to find causes that may improve the chance of successfully addressing the problem, and also when people are jumping to solutions much too soon. And again, just let's throw money at it, let's throw band-aids at it, and hopefully that'll solve the issue. And it's also important when you need to identify actions to address the problem and find your collaborative partners in the community for taking action. And that's very important, as well as finding the right people to help you tackle the issue and solve the issue mutually. Which then, of course, leads us to, how should I analyze a community problem, right? And your ultimate goal is to understand the problem better and to deal with it more effectively. So the method you choose should accomplish that goal. And I'll be offering a couple things and some guidelines and some specific ways in order for you to determine the causes of your community problem or your issue. Okay, so if you don't have a pen or a pencil handy, feel free to just save the video and take a look at it later and jot these down. The first thing you want to do, of course, is justify the choice of the problem, and you're going to apply the criteria that I shared before, and that's frequency, duration, range, the severity, equity, and perception. as well as asking yourself whether your organization or another can address its, this issue effectively in order to decide whether the problem is one that you should focus on, right? So you're justifying the choice of that particular problem. For number two, you're going to frame that problem, right? You're going to state the problem without implying a solution or blaming anyone for what's happening, right? So that you can analyze the problem without any assumptions, and so that you can build consensus around whatever solution you arrive at, right? So one way is to state it in terms of lack of a positive behavior, lack of a particular condition, or other factors, right? Or the presence or the size of negative behaviors, or conditions or other factors, right? So you want to make sure that you frame it in a way so that there's really no doubt in your mind or the group's mind or the community's mind that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with. For instance, if you're dealing with health issues, I think in framing a particular problem around health is, let's, for example, there are too many children in the community who are overweight or obese. The problem is particularly serious among low-income families, right? So we've framed the problem very succinctly and very directly and very poignantly, right? The next thing would be to identify whose behavior and or how the environmental factors need to change for the problem to begin to be solved, right? And that's working under the social change model, right? So this can be a very straightforward as individuals changing their behavior from smoking to not smoking, or as complex as persuading and lobbying legislators to change laws and policies, right? Getting involved with policy advocacy, in order to change other people's behaviors. And especially in low-income communities, there's some issues that would definitely would be positively impacted by identifying whose behavior and or what and how the environmental factors need to change in order for the problem to be solved. And behavioral change is one of those things that takes time. So don't expect community behaviors or community norms to change overnight. Okay, realistically, we're looking at conditions change, process change, systems change, to determine on how complex it is, 5 to 10 years. Okay, so the next thing that we're looking at is analyzing the root causes of the problem or the issue that you've identified. And the real cause of a problem may not be immediately apparent. It may be a function of a social or political system, or it may be rooted in a behavior or situation that may at first glance seem unrelated to it. But in order to find the underlying cause, you may have to use more analytical methods, including critical thinking and the but why technique, right? You always ask the whys, the five whys, right? But why is this happening? Why? So keep asking that question. Also look, going down the road into, I think that was number 4. So number 5 would be looking to identify the restraining and driving forces that affect the problem, right? And this is called the force field analysis, and it means looking at the restraining forces that act to keep the problem from changing. The social structures, cultural traditions, ideologies, politics, lack of knowledge, lack of access to healthy conditions, lack of access to healthcare, and the driving forces that push it toward change, right? And this is all from being dissatisfied with the way things are, whether it's because of public opinion, policy change, ongoing public education efforts, existing alternatives to unhealthy or unacceptable activity or conditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So consider how you can use your understanding of these forces in devising solutions to the problem. Right. So again, it's identifying the restraining and driving forces that affect the problem, right? What is holding you back from dealing with the issue, and what will drive you forward to deal with the issue? if that makes it easier to understand. Next, I think you would need to find any relationship that exists among the problem that you're concerned with and others in the community, right? So it's finding those collaborative forces. So it may be that other problems stem from the same root cause, and that there are other organizations whom you can partner with because they've already been dealing with it or are looking to deal with it. So it's understanding the relationships among community issues can be important in looking to resolve community issues. And I think also in the next step, you would look to identify personal factors that may contribute to the problem, and whether the problem involves individual behavior or community conditions. Each individual is affected by how can I put this? So, each individual is affected by I lost that. And so the next one we're looking at is to identify personal factors that may contribute to the problem. So whether the problem involves individual behavior or community conditions, each individual affected by it brings a whole collection of knowledge, some perhaps accurate, some perhaps not, right? Some is probably based on hearsay, and some just based on he said, she said, or I heard from, right? And these are going to be from people's beliefs, people's skills, people's education, background, experience, culture, assumptions that people have about the world, and assumptions that people have about others. And of course, there's always biological and genetic traits that come along with it. And all of these might contribute to the problem or to its solution, or both, right? So as an example, people have a genetic predisposition for diabetes and other conditions, right? And we could attach that to, let's say, Latinos, right? Latinos are genetically predisposed. I always have an issue with that word, and because I'm trying to move a little too fast. Yeah. So the next one we'll look at is identifying personal factors that may contribute to the problem. So whether the problem involves individual behavior or community conditions, each individual affected by it brings a whole collection of knowledge. Some perhaps is accurate, and some perhaps is not, right? Some is probably based on assumption, and some is just based on hearsay. And some of it is based on people's beliefs, on people's skills, people's education, people's background, people's experiences. Culture is a whole huge contributor to identifying personal factors that may contribute to a particular problem. We might have biological and genetic traits as well. It's important to ensure that you're identifying those personal factors that may be contributing to the problem itself. And as an example, we might say that Latinos have a genetic predisposition for diabetes and other conditions. There is a lack of knowledge about healthy nutrition in Latino communities. There is a lack of knowledge and skills for preparing healthy foods in a Latino community, or eliminate the Latino community. It can be whatever community. So those are some examples of personal factors that contribute to a community problem or issue. In this case, these were examples of determinants of health. We also want to look at identifying those environmental factors that may contribute to a community's problem, right? And just as there are factors relating to individuals that may contribute to or help solve the problem you're concerned with, there are also factors within the community environment that do the very same thing. So these might include the availability or the lack of services, the availability or lack of information, or other support systems, and then of course the degree of accessibility, right? Just because you have a community center doesn't mean that you can access it. Just because the community has a resource center, that doesn't mean that the availability in the hours that they operate are accessible to you. And of course, there are some overarching factors such as poverty, living conditions, official policies, and of course, socioeconomic conditions are what are identified as environmental factors that may contribute to the problem. And some of those additional environmental factors could include, as I mentioned before, poverty, the lack of employment, the lack of availability of healthy foods, which is a big thing in lower income neighborhoods, right? It's general availability, whether it's at home, at school, in the community itself, and and even if and when there's the availability of some foods, are they foods that are just high in salt, high in sugar, high in fat? In looking at that as well. And then of course a huge environmental factor is constant media bombardment of ads of unhealthy foods, snacks, drinks, and fast food in our communities, and the availability of fast food, right? And of course the economics attached to that fast food, right? It's cheaper to buy fast food than it is to buy healthy food in most communities. So those are what are considered environmental factors. We also might want to move into identifying targets and specifically what you would consider agents of change for addressing the particular problem, right? So the question is, who should focus on these efforts with you, and who has the power to improve the solution or the situation, and who has the power to help you come up with a solution, right? And these are often the same people that you associate with, whether it's part of your social network or your work network. And the best solution to a particular problem may be policy change, for instance, and the best route for that might be to increase or create a advocacy effort aimed at the officials who can make it happen, right? Whether it's your legislator, whether it's your board of supervisors, whether it's your mayor, city hall, et cetera, right? And your the agents of change that you can use, in looking for identifying specifically those agents of change. These can be, parents, children, their children, youth, elementary and middle school and high school teachers, school officials, neighborhood watch groups, executives, people involved in public relations, and ironically, gang members, and the highest risk youth, or what is known now as at promise youth, right? Are sources for change agents and people who are already on their way to becoming effective leaders. So draw from your community, and you're doing, if you do recruit from your highest risk populations, such as at promise youth and gang members, that you are actually doing two things, and that's redirecting negative behaviors on the part of the youth, as well as start solving the community problem, right? So it's important that you look at all the resources that are in your community. Of course, again, parents, students, residents, schools, the committees within all the schools, local public officials, recreation centers, any organizations within the community that bring people to them, right? Hospitals, clinics, medical practices, excuse me, and even some business owners that will get involved in helping to change and looking to solve community problems, because a community problem could also be a business problem, right? So it's important to recruit from that base, and I think that's a good start for you to ensure that you're looking and analyzing a community problem in a very specific, in a very systematic way, so that you can work towards community solutions. And remember that these are issues that you can't do alone, that you must hopefully rely on a community, and community support would definitely go a long way when it comes to solving its internal issues. So with that, that's pretty much all I have for you. So that's it for today's coffee break. So make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this video. Get back to work or whatever it is that you were doing, and we'll see you at our next coffee break. Should you want a workshop on this particular topic, feel free to get at me. Lates.